right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. This is day 4, so this is our final day. We're almost done, so definitely looking forward to that. So looking at the initial question, what maintenance tasks do you struggle with the most? I know this group has a lot of just brand new people who are brand new to IMA, so some of you have not completed any maintenance tasks yet. Of those that have, it looks like it's mostly adding new vendor packs and updating ship points. So all of these are topics that we are going to be covering during today's session. Then this is the final day. We're focusing on maintenance tasks that you may need to complete in IMA for your businesses. On Monday, we did the IMA basics. Tuesday was the new item grid. And yesterday, we did some IMA features. I am recording today's webinar, and all of the links will be available to you sometime tomorrow. And I will send out those links along with the PowerPoints, but you can go ahead and download those on the right side of your screen. As a reminder, please put yourself in Do Not Disturb status and close all email applications until the session is over. And you guys are currently muted. At the end of the session, I will unmute the phones, and if you want to ask questions audibly at that time, you'll be able to do that. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat pod to ask any questions throughout the presentation. All right, so the purpose of today's session is to provide an overview of maintenance tasks that may need to be completed in IMA. So after today's session, you should be able to demonstrate how to add a new carton and or vendor pack to an existing item, demonstrate how to update ship points and assign different ship points to different DC locations when needed, as well as identify the available options to update UPCs and dimensions and weights. So the topics we're going to be covering today to meet those objectives include UPC changes, carton configuration changes, new cartons and vendor packs, ship point changes, and dimensions and weight changes. So you'll notice through the presentation today, we're going to be doing a lot of demos. So I'll be switching back and forth between the PowerPoint and sharing my IMA screen. But first up, we're going to talk about UPC changes. So this one's actually pretty simple. So my operational item has the incorrect UPC. How do I fix it? It really depends on what your buyer needs. So you're going to have to speak with your buyer and find out if they require the same KSN. If they do require the same KSN, then there's really nothing for you to do. Inventory should be the one that strips the UPC and puts the correct one back on. If the buyer does not require the same KSN, then you would sync over a new carton with data sync and just use that correct UPC on that new carton. So this one's actually pretty straightforward. But it all comes down to communicating with your buyer and finding out exactly what they need in regards to the KSN. So any questions about UPC changes? You shouldn't really be going in and doing change requests on UPCs and changing the G10s that way. Like I said, that needs to go to inventory if that is something that needs to be done, if they want to keep the same KSN, because the inventory will be affected, so it just has to go through them to make sure that there's going to be no issues with that. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about carton configuration changes. So there are several reasons why you might want to update carton configurations. It could be that the original carton setup is incorrect, or it could be that your inventory or merchant wants that they want to add additional carton assortment options. This one's also pretty straightforward. If your items are still in process and you realize they have the incorrect carton setup, this can be corrected on the grid in the vendor role. And you would want to make sure this gets corrected before it goes operational. You should request that your merchant or inventory analyst return the items if they are not yet operational. Then you can go into your grid, which I'll be showing you how to do in a second, and you can manually update the carton configuration. Now, if your items are operational, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. You can't actually correct it, not directly. You would have to sync over a new carton with the correct configuration. All right, so we're going to go through a quick demo. So give me just a moment to share my screen. All right, so you should be seeing my screen in IMA now. I actually already have a grid up, so I'm going to search for my grid. And this, I'm just showing you how to update it on an in-process item. So this is if it's not operational yet and you can still change the configuration. So once your grid is loaded, this isn't a field that you're going to find in your default view. So you're going to have to locate it on the tab that it lives on. Carton configuration lives on the Packages tab, so we're going to click on Packages. And the actual name of that field is member quantity, so it's right here. So to update it, it's extremely simple. You just enter the new number for each of the UPCs. So let's say this was set up incorrectly as a 222. I just updated it to 323. So again, it's pretty straightforward, and this is just for in-process items. If you were still actually setting this up, you would have to go back here and complete all of your empty required fields. But if you had requested your merchant or inventory analyst to return this to you, you would locate it in the returned items task list, which is right here, and then you could pull it on a grid, locate the member quantity field on the Packages tab, and update it, and then reapprove it. Meredith did not see my screen. Did anybody else see my screen? I want to make sure that it did come through. Okay, I'm not sure why you didn't see it, Meredith. Or maybe it did come up eventually. You were typing for a second. Okay, good. Nothing is being shared right now, so I did cancel. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to go back in, and I just want to make sure that you guys did see it when I was sharing it. All right, at this point, you should be seeing the screen. Okay. So if you didn't see that specific interaction, it'll be in the video, and maybe there was just a little bit of lag or something, but moving forward, you should be able to see each of the interactions as I do them, and I do apologize for any confusion that caused. All right, so I'm stopping sharing. So again, you're going to see that nothing's being shared. That's expected. And we're going to go back to the PowerPoint now. All right. So any questions about changing the in-process items for package configuration? Let me go back for a second. Looks like we have a question being typed out, so I'm going to wait a second. So it would only be in process if new. Yes, you may have already approved it through the vendor role, and if you did, you would have to have your merchant or inventory analyst return it to you as long as it wasn't operational yet. You always want to correct this if it's still pending, because once it becomes operational, you can't just make a change request for it. You would have to sync over a brand new carton and go through the setup process for that brand new carton again. So again, if you've already approved it, just ask for them to return it. It's going to appear in your returned items task list. All right, so I do have a quick question over here for you on the right side. How do you correct carton configurations on existing or operational items? So these are items that are already existing in IMA. There may be orders on those items already, or maybe there's not orders on the items, but it's already existing, and you can't get it back into your role. How would you correct it? I'll give you just a few more seconds to respond to that question. All right, going to end this. So most of you did get this correct. You would sync over a new carton. So as a reminder, you cannot do a change request for a carton configuration once it becomes operational. You don't have the capabilities to do that. We don't either. If something has to be changed, it would have to be done behind the scenes, and it can't always be done that way. So good job. All right, so we're going to move on to new cartons. It looks like we have a question really quick. Stephanie's asking, does that apply if a pack size change involves a UPC change? I believe you would have to sync over the new carton from your data sync provider if it's a different UPC. If your buyer requires the same KSN, that's something they might have to get FlowPath involved with. So that would have to be a decision on their end. So no problem. That was a really good question. All right, so we're going to move on to new cartons now. There are a few reasons why you might need additional cartons. It could be that there's a change in carton configuration. It could be that a new vendor will be supplying an existing item, or it could be for promotional displays. So just remember, anytime you create a new carton, there also is going to have to be a new vendor pack. If it doesn't have a new vendor pack, one, the system won't let it be processed, but two, you wouldn't have any way to order that new carton. So the most common errors when adding a new carton include that the UPCs match the incorrect quantity, the carton dimensions do not align with the eaches, or vendor packs were not created for new exploding assortment members. The process for creating a new carton depends on the type of carton you're trying to create. So as we've discussed, we do require all of our new vendors to use a data sync provider to sync over their items to our system. However, that can only really be used if it's for each packages, each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons. If you do assorted cartons, mixed cartons, and pallet cartons, those would not be able to be synced over, and you'd have to build those manually within IMA along with the corresponding vendor pack. Now, one of the really nice parts about syncing those new cartons over, if you use carton types that can be synced over, is that it will sync over a vendor pack automatically with that new carton. So you wouldn't have to create the vendor pack manually. So be sure if you do use a data sync provider, you should be using your data sync provider to sync over new cartons. There are exceptions to this. Sometimes they're just depending on the circumstances. You may not have the ability. Maybe the data sync provider's system is down, or there's just something's happening that's preventing that sync from happening, and you need to get those new cartons built ASAP. So in those instances, those rare instances, I'm going to show you how to add a new uniform carton and a new exploding assortment carton. So again, typically you should be syncing those over, but there are always exceptions to the rules. So give me 1 second while I share my screen. All right, so you should be seeing my screen now. I'm sharing IMA from Internet Explorer. And the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to add a new a new uniform carton to an existing item. Give me 1 second to grab my KSN or my G10. All right. So first you would do a quick search for your KSN, and we want to add a uniform carton, so we're going to go to the Packages tab. Up here at the top, you can see uniform carton is the one that's selected by default. So we're going to leave that as is, and I'm going to click Add Package. So on this page, you first have to enter your G10. Your division is already selected for you. So then you have to select your vendor information. And you will probably have this in a drop-down. I just have to search for it since I'm set up as a super user. All right, so once I've selected my vendor information, I would verify the SHC category, and then I would select the subcategory. And then finally, I would click Add Package. So this is the page that displays after you add a uniform carton. So you have to enter some information in addition to what you entered on the last screen. So first I'm going to enter a description. Then down here under members, I'm going to select the each that I'm building this uniform carton for, and I'm clicking add. All right, so at this point, you would want to enter your each quantity. I'm going to enter 10. Down below that, you will see your total eaches per inner, and number of inners. So if this particular uniform carton was not going to have any inners, and it was just going to be the 10 different jeans in a single box, I would enter 10 because each of those pairs of jeans are acting as an inner. And then when I click Save, you'll see it automatically updates the total eaches and the eaches per inner. Now let's say I did want to include inners in this carton. I'm going to have 2 inners. I'm putting 5 jeans in each one. Once I enter 2 and click Save, you'll see it automatically updates. So my eaches per inner, and number of inners is 10, 5, 2. Now you do have to make sure that this is properly divisible. So for example, if I were to put 3 as my number of inners, it's going to give me an answer there. It's not going to give me an error at this point, but 3 times 3 is definitely not 10. So when I would go to approve this through workflow, I would end up with a hard error because these inners and eaches per inner don't add up to the total eaches. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to 10. And then next you need to enter the dimensions and the weights for the uniform carton. So give me 1 second. Okay, and I do want to show you, if you enter information on this page and then you try to click off of the page, you'll get this message. So this message is actually kind of backwards. So normally if you're in something like Microsoft Word or Excel and you try to exit without saving, the message that pops up asks you if you want to save. So you click OK by default, just without thinking. So that's how most applications function. IMA has to be a little bit different, of course, and it's actually asking if you want to continue without saving. So if you were to click OK by default, you would actually lose all the changes you just made. So you need to click Cancel and then click Save. All right, so then you would go to Workflow tab and you check for errors. And we should get an error because I wanted you to see what it looks like. So here you can see we did get an error. If you look further down this page right here, we can see it actually says error. Sometimes it'll say warning, and even though it says errors up here, it'll say warning down here. If you get warnings, you can ignore those. There's nothing that you need to fix for warnings. So only when it actually says error down in this section do you need to fix something. All right, so we have 2 errors actually. The first one, the message, says a vendor pack must be created for this package. Oh yeah, so don't forget, you always have to create the vendor packs for any new cartons. The message below that, the field is depth, and the message says at least one dimension of a parent package is empty. So I actually didn't enter my weight. So to update that, I would go back to the Packages tab. I would click into my new uniform carton. So I know it's this one for a couple of reasons. One, this one has the shipping marking number. All cartons have shipping marking numbers. So I know it's not going to be this one. Also, over on the left side of the screen, you'll see this box. If that box is there and it can actually be removed, that means that this particular piece of your item, this new carton, is still in process. So that's another way that I know that this is the one I want to click into and not that one. So I'm going to click into my uniform carton, and I'm going to add my weight. And click Save. So you will need to determine the dimensions and weights on your own because obviously we can't tell you what the dimensions and weights of your boxes are. A lot of people will call into the help desk for that, and the help desk can tell you how to complete specific information, but they can't tell you what that information should be. So just make sure that you get this information from whoever handles the carton sizes at your company. And then we'll click Save. So I'm not going to add a vendor pack at this point because the next section we're going to talk about vendor packs. So I'm going to move on to showing you how to create a new exploding assortment from scratch. So to create a new exploding assortment, you would hover over Create, and you would click Exploding Assortment. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to enter your G10. And then you need to select your SHC division. After that, you need to enter your vendor information. One second. There we go. And then you can select your category. Finally, you would select your subcategory, and then you would click Add Package. So on this page, it's confirming which type of package you want. So we are going to leave it as the defaulted, which is carton. If you were creating a pallet within the system, then you would select pallet. So we're going to leave it as carton and click Create Package. All right, so now we have to enter the description for our item. We also, you do not have to enter the brand, so you can ignore that, but we do have to select if there's an EAS tag. And then you would click Save. Okay, so this page looks kind of similar to what we were seeing with our uniform carton page. We already completed the description, but now we need to add our eaches that belong to this carton, because right now there's nothing showing here. So you would click Search for Assorted Members. Then you can search for your items. So I'm searching by KSN just because that's the quickest way for the QA environment to really locate items. But you could also search by stock number, and then you could bring back multiple KSNs at a time. That would actually let you add multiple KSNs at a single time rather than doing it 3 times like I'm doing. All right, so this is going to be my last one. There we go. So now all 3 are showing on this exploding assortment carton. The next thing I want to do is I want to update my quantity. Right now, by default, they're always going to show 1. So I'm going to update this to 3. So after this, we want to enter our dimensions and weights for this new carton. Okay, 1 second. So once you've entered all your information, you can click Save. Now if we go to the Workflow tab, if it wants to load, there we go. The only error we should be getting is that there's a missing vendor pack. So again, you have to create a new vendor pack for each carton. So that's how you would set up a uniform carton or an exploding assortment carton manually. Again, that's not something you should be normally doing. You would normally be syncing those over. But I do like to show you because there are always exceptions to that. There are times where you don't have any other option. So that's why I do like to show you guys how to do that. If you're doing assorted and mixed cartons or pallets, you would have to build those manually. So any questions about adding new cartons? All right, so I do have a couple of knowledge checks for you. And there we go. So over on the right side, which of the below new cartons should be synced from your data sync provider? So you can select multiple answers for this one. Just a couple more seconds. All right, so looks like most of the correct answers were selected. The correct answers were each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons. Those are ones that should be synced over from your data sync provider. One of the benefits of going ahead and syncing those over rather than doing them manually is that there's less information you have to complete about them. That also means that there's less information that could end up being done in error. So anytime you have to enter information repetitively, it's going to be much more likely that you're going to end up having an error with the information you enter. All right, and the next question. Which of the below new cartons has to be built manually? You don't have any other option for these except to build them manually. All right, just a couple more seconds. Okay, so it looks like the answers for this were definitely in the majority. The correct answers for this question are mixed cartons and assorted cartons. So for these two cartons, you have no other option except to build them manually. You cannot sync these over at all because we can't receive those types of cartons through data sync. Good job. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and talk about new vendor packs because those can sometimes go hand in hand with new cartons. All right, so my merchant or inventory analyst has requested that I create a new vendor pack from an existing item. why would I need to create a new vendor pack? And we actually have a short activity here. So this is called a whiteboard screen. We talked about this briefly, this question, briefly on Monday, but we didn't spend too much time on it. So I'm interested to see what ideas you come up with today. So you can use the text button over on the left side of your screen. There's that little toolbar that's on the left side, and you can select text, and then just click somewhere on your screen, and you can start typing a suggestion for why you might need to create a new vendor pack. So go ahead and take a minute or two, and see if you can come up with any ideas. All right, so just a few more seconds, and then we'll look at some of these and move on to show you guys all of the answers. Okay, so we have a few good ideas here. We have quantity change, new flow type, pack size change / dimensions, new item, each / member, new tier group. Romy's example is a really good one. So new pack size change or dimensions. So if you have if you think over a new carton because you need a new configuration, then yes, the new carton would need a new vendor pack. But if you just have dimension changes, that wouldn't necessitate a new vendor pack. So kind of partially right, that was a good guess. And then Romy's example again, that's a really good one. They say that we bought a company and their bags, but we renamed them with our brand and changed the appearance of the packaging. So yeah, one of the reasons why we might need a new vendor pack would be that let's say vendor A has been supplying a product and they're going to stop supplying it, but vendor B is going to come in and start supplying the same product. So that's exactly what you described. And in that instance, they would need their own vendor pack. So let's go ahead and we're going to return back to the PowerPoint. So great ideas. And we can see all of them listed out right here. So you guys did get most of them. You got the new flow type. Additional store format, I don't think I saw that one. So that would be if we have been having your product sold in our Kmart stores and we want to start selling it in our Sears stores, we would need a new vendor pack specifically for Sears. Romy's example was the third one, the different vendor. Again, the change in carton configurations. So if you have a new carton, you do need a new vendor pack. And then I don't think I saw the last one either, if it's more than one cost. So typically all of the vendor packs on an item should be the same cost. Exception to that would be if we had been selling your item in the 48 continental states and we want to start selling it in Hawaii or Alaska or Puerto Rico. Those would require a higher cost. So they would need their own vendor pack. For some of you, depending on the businesses that you work in, you may only ever really set up a single vendor pack for your items, and it may be a rare occurrence for you to add new vendor packs to existing items. And others of you, depending on the businesses you're in, you may get several requests from your buying and inventory teams to add new vendor packs to existing items. So it's really going to depend on your specific business, how often you're going to need to do this. So the most common errors when adding a new vendor pack include that the desired ship point is not available to select, the DUNS number is not set up for the correct format, or it's not set up for the correct flow. So if your desired ship point isn't available to select, that means that when you go to select it from the drop-down, like it's just straight up not there. It's not in the drop-down menu. So we're going to go over in a few slides how to add or how to request ship points to be added to your DUNS. For the second and third one, I've spoken about this a few times this week, but your DUNS number has a specific setup for it. It's usually set up for whatever format you may typically work with, and it's typically set up for specific flow types. So if you usually have your product only sold in our Kmart stores, and we want to start selling it in Sears, and you've never had your product sold in Sears before, your DUNS number may not be set up correctly for Sears. So you would need to reach out to vinmain@searshc.com, and they would either add that new format to your existing DUNS, or you may want a brand new DUNS specifically for that format. Same thing for the flow. If you typically ship your product DC and your inventory team now wants to be able to order it DSD, if you've never done that before, you may not be set up for it. So you wouldn't see that available in the drop-down to select. So the process is very similar to new cartons. It really depends on if you use data sync or if you set items up manually. So if you do use a data sync provider, you would sync over new vendor packs with the existing UPCs. And if you set items up manually, you would add or duplicate a vendor pack from the vendor pack tab in IMA. And I'm actually going to go back into IMA, and I'm going to show you how to add a vendor pack and how to duplicate a vendor pack. Before I do see I have a question from Stephanie, so sorry me again, perfectly fine. So if the buyer requires us to keep the KSN for a new UPC, this requires us to set up a new vendor pack. Yes, if it's a new cartons always require a new vendor pack because those vendor packs are tied to specific UPCs, and you can't change which UPCs they're tied to. So if you have a new carton, you're going to have a new UPC. If you don't have that vendor pack, we wouldn't know where to ship, how that new UPC is going to be shipped. Awesome. All right, so give me 1 second while I share my screen again. All right, so you should see my screen at this point. And now we are going to add a new vendor pack to this new exploding assortment that we just created. So if we go to the vendor pack tab, you'll see there's nothing there because there's nothing in process for this right now. This was a brand new exploding assortment that I created. So I'm going to click Add Vendor Pack. All right, so here it loads the vendor pack page, and you'll see it's completely blank. So no information has been filled out on this page. So you have to complete everything with the red asterisk next to it. So first I'm going to select the shipping package. So remember how I said that the vendor packs are tied to specific G10s? So this is where it's tied to that. So you wouldn't be able to change this. From the DUNS number, you would select your specific DUNS. Again, I do have to search for mine. And there it is. All right, so once you've selected your DUNS information, now you have the ability to select your flow type and primary store format. So here we can see the options I have are DC, DSD, and VCDC. Now, you may not have these same options if you go to build a manual vendor pack. You may only have DC listed, or you may only have DSD, or you may have something completely different that's not in my list. And that's just how your DUNS is set up. So I'm going to select DC, and then I'm going to select my primary store format. So this is intended for Kmart, so I'm going to the second one here, all Kmart stores. And then I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to enter my vendor stock number. Vendor description, fine. I'm going to enter my order quantity, multiple, and unit of measure. So this is a carton, so I'm selecting carton. And then I'm going to select my projected first in-store date. So this just needs to be when your buying team is expecting this to be in the store to be sold. Keep in mind this cannot be more than 3 months in the past. So if we scroll down further, here we can see this is where our DC locations are listed. And you do have a ship point. This one actually only has one option available, so it's selected it by default. But a lot of times you may have multiple ship points set up for you to choose from. If you do have multiple ship points to set up and you have multiple DC locations to select them for, instead of setting them manually like this, you could actually select it from up here and then click Apply to All and click OK. And it would apply it to all of your DC locations here. Sometimes there could be 6 or 7 of them. And that will just save you some time. So once you've completed all of that, you would click Save. And then we are going to go to the Workflow tab and check for errors on this item. There we go. All I got was a warning for converted cube. And like I said, you can always ignore warnings. So you do not have to do anything to resolve this. So we can go ahead and select Approve and Submit. So that's how you add a brand new vendor pack. Now, there is another method to add a vendor pack called duplicating a vendor pack. Give me 1 second to get my KSN. There we go. So to duplicate a vendor pack, this is only going to be for existing items, so items that already have a vendor pack on them. You would do a quick search, and then you could click Vendor Packs tab. So from this page, if you want to duplicate a vendor pack, you need to click into the hyperlink of the vendor pack you want to duplicate. Now in this instance, there's only one option, so it's not a hard one to choose. But you may have multiple vendor packs listed here, and you would just want to pick the vendor pack that has the information closest to what your new vendor pack information would be. So I'm going to click into that vendor pack, and then on the top right of the screen, you can see this Duplicate Vendor Pack button. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and now we see another new page. And you're going to work the drop-downs from the left to the right side of your screen. The very first option is which store format. So I'm going to select Kmart, and then I need to select my vendor information. And there we go, I'm going to add that. From there, we want to select our flow type. So last time we added the DC, so this time I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to select DSD. After that, we want to select our primary store format. So I'm going to select Kmart, and then you would select the package that this is for. So this is most likely, more than often, just going to have one option for you to select. Now, if you needed to add multiple vendor packs and you wanted to duplicate them at a single time, you could use this page. So let's say you were previously shipping Kmart DC, and your buyer has asked you to add a Kmart DSD vendor pack as well as a Sears DC vendor pack. So we already did the Kmart DSD, so then you can come down here and select Sears and go through this process to identify the information for your Sears vendor pack. And if you want to do more than 3, you can even click this Add button and add more lines. So we're going to stick with the first one, and then you're going to click Create Duplicates. All right, so this is our new vendor pack. We still have to do a few things with this. We can't just go to the workflow and approve, or you're definitely going to get some errors. So we're going to click into the vendor pack number hyperlink. And if we scroll down, we can see that the California Prop 65 questions are empty, so we need to populate those. And so on the previous vendor pack, it was DC. So there was much more to this page. If we could scroll down further and select our ship points for the DCs. Since this is a DSD vendor pack, there are no DC location information, so we don't have to select ship points. So this is the end of the page for a DSD vendor pack. So then we would click Save, and then you'd go to Workflow tab and check for errors and approve. All right. So any questions so far about vendor packs? Okay, I do have a quick question for you guys. True or false, new vendor packs should always be built manually. Just a few more seconds. All right, so most of you guys got this correct. That is false. If possible, if you have the data sync provider and everything is going, operating as it should, you should sync over those new vendor packs. And you can sync them over with an existing UPC. If you build items manually regularly, or if something's holding up the process of being able to sync it over, there are those specific transmission times that we covered on Tuesday, then you may want to build it, you may have to build it manually, but when possible, you should sync it. All right, so next we're going to talk about ship points. So there are several reasons for ship point changes. It could be that a shipping location has closed, or maybe you adjusted the route for a better deal. So for example, if we have a DC location in California and a DC location in New Jersey, and you have the product we're buying from you available in your warehouse in California and Pennsylvania, then you may want to set the ship point for the Pennsylvania warehouse for our New Jersey DC, and then for the California warehouse for our California DC. Because that's obviously going to be much cheaper than having us go from your Pennsylvania warehouse to both California and New Jersey. Now, if you need to do multiple ship points, you first have to set it up with a single ship point. It cannot be set up with multiple ship points initially. So once it becomes operational, you can then come back and do a change request to set different ship points for different DC locations. So the most common errors when changing a ship point include selecting the incorrect ship point or the ship point not being available. So if that ship point is not available, you can submit a request through the vendor portal. Also, a note about selecting the incorrect ship point. If you do select the incorrect ship point, then we are going to show up at the wrong warehouse for your product, and you are not going to have it available and ready to pick up. That's going to end up costing us money. It's probably going to end up costing you money. So it's really important to make sure that your ship points are selected correctly. To request new ship points be added to your DUNS, you can do that on the vendor portal. So you would click IMA here, and then if you go down the page under ship point changes, you can click here. It's going to load a new page for you. And here you would just complete this form, and then you would click submit. Just keep in mind this isn't going to update instantaneously. It will take a couple of days for them to get it added. And once it's been completed, they will send you an email to let you know that your request has been completed. So this is a high-level overview of how to do a ship point update in IMA. We're running a little tight on time, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go through these, and I'm actually going to go and do the demo so you can see me do it in IMA itself. But you do have that for your records in the PowerPoint that you can refer to whenever you need to. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so you should be seeing IMA once again. Let me go and grab my KSM. All right, there we go. So you would do a quick search for the KSM, and then your ship points live on the Vendor Packs tab. So that's the tab we're going to go to. Then you would click into the hyperlink of the vendor pack that you want to update. And then you're going to scroll down your page. So down here, you would select the box next to change DC locations. It's going to be right above your tier groups. Then you're going to select create change request. All right, so on this page, if you're changing all of your DC locations from one ship point to another ship point, again, you can just select it here, and then you can click Apply to All. If you want to set different ship points for different DC locations, then you're going to want to explode out your tier group section by clicking that plus sign. So now we can see all of our DC locations. We can see our previous or our current ship point, and we can select a new one right here. So this is a good example. This one, a DC is in California. You have a warehouse in California. Your product's going to be there. So we're going to select California for that one. And for this one, let's say we do want to go to New Jersey, but we want to go to the Bayonne, New Jersey location. So now we've set different ship points for the different DC locations. So I'm going to click Save and go to Next. It's going to automatically load that workflow tab, and you would check for errors and approve. All right, any questions about changing ship points? Do you have a question for you on the right? If you need to set up different ship points for different DCs, you have to initially set up only one ship point and then create a change request after the item is operational. All right, so just a few more seconds on this question. All right, so this is actually pretty divided between you guys. So this is actually true. So if you are working in a new item grid, you can't select different ship points for different DCs. You only have the option to select a single ship point. So you would have to select that single ship point, approve it, let it go operational, and then after it's operational, you can do a change request, like I just showed you, to select different ship points for different DC locations. All right, almost done. This is the last topic of the day, dimensions and weights. So there are a few reasons for dimensions and weight changes. It could be that the items are so old they're wrong. Maybe you set these 10 years ago and literally like the physical packaging of the product has changed so that they are now a different dimension or a different weight. Could be also that when you put them in, you just kind of put something in, and at that time we didn't have any dimensions and weights rules in place within IMA, so there was no kind of check and balances on those dimensions and weights at that time. Could be also that you added a new vendor pack with the correct dimensions and weights. Sorry, I said that wrong. Could be that you added a new carton with correct dimensions and weights, but the eaches are now wrong because they were incorrect to begin with. And your carton dimensions and weights have to align properly with your eaches. So, for instance, if you put your each dimensions larger than what they actually were, and now you're putting the correct carton dimensions, it may not meet that minimum huge sum value. Getting tongue-tied. So that's another reason why you may need to do a change. So the most common errors when changing dimensions and weights could be that you create the change and you forget to approve it, and that's the same with any change request, or calculating that cube incorrectly. So if you do sync over your items, you can actually sync over those updated dimensions and weights directly from your data sync provider. Then you wouldn't have to do a change request for it. You could just sync it over, it goes into your new item task list, and you would just approve that change. If you do assorted cartons, mixed cartons, and pallet cartons, those cannot be synced over. It would have to be updated manually in IMA. Now I know on Monday we did talk about exemption rules and that dimension exception indicator. So if you have something like pillows that are being compressed, or something like chairs where it's being stacked, or something that's being nested, you may qualify to use the dimension exception indicator. You would change it on the packages tab for a single item, and if you have multiple items, you can use that changes grid, so you can change it all at a single time. Now, unfortunately, you cannot change dimensions and weights itself on the changes grid. So if you need to change dimensions and weights, you have to do that on the packages tab. So you would do a quick search for your item, you would go to that package tab here, and you would select the, there we go, you would select the box next to the dimension exception indicator and click create change request. Now these are actually all grouped together by the system, so it doesn't really matter which one you select. Just select something over in this dimensions area and then click create change request. It's going to load this page, and here you can change your dimension exception indicator flag if that's what you need to do. But you can also change your depth, height, or width fields here as well. This is how you would change your dimensions or how you would change your weight. Once you make those changes, you would click Save and go to Next and approve through your workflow. Now, if you want to update the dimension exception indicator on the changes grid, you would just select that here, copy and paste your KSNs or your G10s here, just like I showed you yesterday, and then click Create Grid. You'd have to enter your grid name, and then you do have to scroll to the right to locate this field because it brings back so many options because there's so many fields grouped together with it. You would update it and then click Approve. So any questions about updating the dimensions and weights? Looks like there's a question being typed. While that's being typed, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the final question for you. True or false, if you can't resolve dimension errors, you should just change the dimension exception indicator to yes. I'll give you a few seconds to answer that question. And Stephanie is asking, if you leave a space blank, will it default to what is currently loaded? That is, so if you're doing a change request, I know depending on the type of change request you're doing, it has several fields grouped together sometimes. And if you don't enter anything into any of those fields, it's just going to stay the same. So don't feel like you have to complete every single field that comes in with a change request. A good question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And if you can't resolve dimension errors, you should just change the dimension exception indicator to yes. This is false. If you change this to yes when it shouldn't be, we could end up with a lot of issues with scheduling the trucks and scheduling the product that's supposed to go on the trucks, and that could end up costing money. So only use the dimension exception indicator if you have a legitimate reason, like stacking or nesting or compressing items. All right, so I'm going to close this out really fast. I know it's right at the end here. So some key points. If a carton configuration is incorrect, you must create a new carton with the correct configuration. A new carton always requires a new vendor pack, and a new vendor pack does not necessarily require a new carton. It is best practice to sync over new cartons and vendor packs rather than creating them manually, although sometimes it is required. And before fixing an incorrect UPC, communicate with your buyer to determine whether the same KSN is required. And finally, you have to wait until an item is operational before you can select different ship points for different DCs. I will be sending a survey link out probably tomorrow, along with the links for all of the videos and the PowerPoints. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts were in this week's session, if it was helpful to you. Otherwise, if you have any questions, I want to stay on the line. You can always email Vendor University. But I do hope you guys have a great upcoming weekend and that you found this session helpful for you. Have a great day.